Hey, Reckless Creatives. This is Jeannie here. Sadie is off today. I greatly miss her, but my liver is probably happy. There will be no quotes. There will be no drinking. Okay, maybe I had one sip with Lucas, but so our guest today is Lucas McNelly. He is an original crowdfunder. I mean, like original. And he's going to share some of that with us, but mostly we're talking about everything, ranging from making a short film, what you learn from being on set, how to handle depression, or at least how he did. And we also talked a lot about not worrying about what other people think. I mean, I think that's part of the struggle of creatives is we have to get out of our own head and just focus on making genuine art, which we will talk about. And also we're going to talk about this short film that he made that had 238 million views. You heard me right, people. 238 million views. And he's going to tell you how he did it. So without further ado, here is Lucas McNelly. You know, I'm with Lucas. So this is like mandatory. Let me get it open. Okay. Cheers.
Cheers.
Let's get reckless.
Cool.
So, we've known each other for kind of a long time.
Like 11 years, 10 years.
I know.
Something like that. Somewhere in that.
And we have actually met in person.
Right. Yeah. There's photo evidence.
There's photo evidence. And it was in New York City, I think.
Yeah, it was at DIY Days. It was at Lance's DIY Day thing. That one year for, I want to say it was 2011. Because Gary was there, and I think Marty was there, and Ted Hope was there, a bunch of people.
Yep, it was there. And I had just gotten my job at Script Mag.
That sounds right.
I remember that. Yep, it was a long time ago. So, okay, so for people who don't know you, not only is Lucas awesome, but yeah, I mean, come on. But I first really remember being kind of in awe of you. Like I was a writer at that point. I never made a film. And I never, like all those filmmaker people who are doing these indie things, I was like, wow, look at that. What are they doing? How do they do that? Like that takes such balls. Like, this is awesome. And then I see your crowdfunding and you did that year without rent. So because there's a lot of new people in the world now to Twitter who weren't in the original Twitter days. A lot of turnover in Twitter, and a lot of that old gang is kind of gone or kind of gave up on filmmaking and went, just who knows where they went, or just left Twitter because
their accounts got verified and now they're too big for us, things like that.
This is true. Fun fact, Twitter has denied me twice verification.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly.
I have one pending and I'm sure it's not gonna work.
It might work for you. I mean, because okay, this is side note. The instructions that Twitter gives you on how to get verified are just total bullshit. They give you they take you down all these little rabbit holes. Why don't you just make it simple? Here's my license. How am I not who I said I am? Here's my license.
Yeah. This should be easy enough.
Exactly.
Like, you have to have this many credits on IMDb. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't mean anything, but all right.
Yeah, because one's not enough. Like, I mean, I know, whatever, just moving on. I'm not bitter at all. Not at all.
I tried to get him to do it because at some point, like a long time ago, like maybe 10 years ago, someone was impersonating me. And I was like, oh, can you please verify me? Because there's this crazy person out there. And they didn't do it.
They're weird.
They're weird.
They're weird. But I've met a lot of great people from Twitter. So I have a love-hate thing. But the year without rent, like, I remember when that first started thinking, wow, this dude's crazy because he's going to take a year of his life and go all around the country, helping people with their indie films, sleeping on couches, in your car, whatever. So before we start going on to what happened after a year without rent, can you tell me a little bit about that and what that experience was like for you as a filmmaker to work on all those different sets?
So the working on the sets was mostly great. And so, like you said, the deal was that I would come to your film wherever it was, and I would get myself there, and I would work for free in whatever capacity you needed. And you just need to find me a couch to sleep on and like feed me a little, and then I would document it for like Filmmaker Magazine and Film Courage and a bunch of other places. So it was great in that I met a lot of cool filmmakers and I learned a lot. And you're just, ping ponging around the country, and you're in Seattle, and then you're in LA, and then you're over here, blah, blah. And you just meet so many different people, and you see so many different things. And that was awesome. You meet some crazy people. And there's a couple shoots where you're just like, oh, good God, this is a disaster.
How many did you do?
Oh, I don't remember. It was
a long time ago.
30 or.
Oh my God.
It was a lot of them.
I mean,
and then there were just gaps where I just like couldn't find anything. And I'm like, guys, I'm in, Denver. Like someone's got to have a shoot within like a couple hours of here that I can like hop over to. And it was harder than I thought it was going to be to find shoots to work on, because people were like just sort of wary of it. They're like, I don't know what this is. There's got to be a catch. And I'm like, no, there's no catch. Just the only catch was that if you wanted me to not talk about something, you had to tell me beforehand.
Oh.
So like, if you didn't want anyone to know that so and so is in the movie because it's a spoiler, then I won't take any pictures of that person. I will pretend they don't exist. But if you and your DP get in a fight over,
I'm taking pictures of that.
Over something, I'm gonna document that, and that's gonna be part of it because that's a real thing that happens.
So did people get pissed off about anything you were kind of reporting on?
There were a couple, they would get mad because they're like, oh yeah, but you said that. I'm like, well, I'm sorry, this is turning into a shit show, man. Like people are like, other people are learning from your problems. So look at it that way. And one producer tried to punch me. So that was fun. But it is what it is. You know me, I like kind of aggravate people sometimes, for good and bad. I get under people's skin.
So when he tried to punch you, did you like block it and then?
No, I just.
Or did he just stepped away?
I think he was gonna, and like someone pulled him away.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah. People are nuts. They really are nuts.
Yeah. But he that was someone who had no business being on producing a film set. That's really where it would end up being, is you would get people who were like in way over their heads, or one of the bigger problems was like producers who didn't really want to put in the work, and they would just sort of wanted to hang out and like hit on the talent. There's that kind of producer. That was usually where the problem was. I don't think I ever had a problem with like a grip or like a DP or anything like that. Like no one who was doing actual work, because they were all like, oh yeah, you're here to help, thank God.
Yeah.
And then I don't think you've been on a lot of shoots, but like if you're actually the people who are actually working, it can get tense and you can start yelling at each other, and that happens, and then you have a beer.
Yeah,
it's fine because it's just a stressful environment, and people's nerves get frayed. You're on like your fourth overnight in a row, and you're tired, and it's dark, and it's raining, and you're like, oh, for fuck's sake, what are you doing to me here?
Yeah, I know. Like I only made one short film, and that was enough. And
yeah,
but you learn. I mean, it was the whole thing. Everybody said it was a great experience, but exhausting, like so exhausting. It might be a different level of exhaustion when it's your own film and you wrote it and you feel like, got all those weight on your shoulders, as opposed to somebody who's coming to work on set. So maybe it's not as emotionally and physically exhausting.
It's a lot more exhausting to be like the director or like the lead producer or something than it is to be like if you're the grip or if you're like the boom op. You're like, okay, well, I'm tired, but I just got to do my thing, put my head down and power through. And that's not so hard. You're not, carrying, like other people aren't asking you questions all day.
Yeah. Like, are you, um, are you like, is there something that you've done on set that you really love doing on set, or and then something you really hate doing? Like what job on set do you hate doing?
That's a good question. I hate being the boom op
I'd
because
be hitting people in the head with that thing.
yeah, like there's that, and you got to keep it out of the frame, and you're doing this, and I don't have like good upper body strength, so I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is so tired. Are we done yet? And they're like, dude, it's been 5 seconds. I'm like, oh, okay. Um, so that's like the easiest thing to screw up. So you have to be really good at it, and I'm not good at it, and I don't like being a PA usually because it's hard to be a PA when you've been a director, because you're just like, what are we doing here? Come on, guys. You just see things. Yeah. And it's just not even like that the people above you in the food chain are like screwing up, but you're just like, it's hard mentally to make that shift. Like it would be hard to be the basketball coach for a long time and then be the trainer on the same team.
Or the water boy.
Or the water boy, yeah. You're like, because you see things, you're like, oh my gosh, just call this play, and you can't say anything. You're just sitting there.
There was, I think it was Lars and the Real Girl. Did you ever see that movie?
Yeah.
I was at a film festival when I saw it, and I think I saw the boom coming into the picture.
Oh, probably, yeah.
A little on that one. Yeah, I did. That was when I was like, oh wow. Like
yeah, the one thing I got really frustrated with is I was on Matt Lillard's film Fat Kid Rules the World, and they put me on, they had me all over the place. They had me like with 6 different departments over the course of the shoot, which was awesome, and that was one of my favorite shoots. But they had me on Firewatch once. So there was this big scene, like the big climactic scene in the film, in a parking garage, like the top floor of a parking garage. And so they really went all out. They had lights like scattered around the city of Seattle, like just shooting up buildings at night, just so you could like highlight, they could see the landscape, the background better. And so they just had me out there babysitting one of those lights in like the middle of Seattle. And I was like, this is so boring. Because all you're doing is like sitting there making sure a homeless person doesn't take off with this big light or like break it, or so you're there on a walkie, so in case if the bulb blows or something, they don't have to send someone 10 blocks to try to fix it. They can just wire over to you and be like, hey, what happened? And be like, oh, this moron unplugged it.
And how many hours at a time would you stare at?
It was like, I think I was there like 4 hours, and it was just boring. It wasn't anything like negative that the production was doing. Someone had to be out there, and it just took me a while to like just sort of reframe it in my head. I'm like, okay, no, this is why I'm here. I'm here because they need someone here. And someone's got to guard this light because it's expensive, and we need it for the shot. Yeah. And so this is what I'm doing. And
I think that's one of the things about filmmaking that people, that is surprising to people the first time they do something. It's like how there's so many details, so many details. And so what, because honestly, sometimes I feel like anybody who wants to make a film is just a lunatic.
You're insane. I was talking to a high school student the other day for an interview, and he was like asking about film school, and I'm like, I wouldn't go to film school if I were you. I'm like, I would make your own films, because you might very well figure out after like the second one that you don't want to do this anymore. And then you're just out whatever money you sunk into those 2 films, and not
$200,000.
Yeah, not the $200,000 MFA from Columbia. And you're like, oh, I can't do anything with this.
Right. And also, like, I'm a super practical person, and I think that you really learn by doing. And there's certain things I'm sure you can learn in the classroom about all this kind of stuff. But I think, like what you did, I'm not suggesting anybody else take an entire year of their life and go around the country and
if someone wants couches. If someone wants to do it, you have my complete blessing. I will help you in any way. You can use the name. I don't care.
Yeah. I mean,
it'd be a really good film school. It'd be way better than going to film school for 2 years.
Oh my God. Yeah. And you can get it done in 1 year. And 1 year. You're sleeping on couches.
you'll meet a lot of people, which is the whole point of film school anyway, is to meet people to collaborate with.
Right. That's what I think too. I feel like film school is definitely more of a networking thing. And so if you're going to go to film school in the middle of Idaho where no other, I'm sure there's some great filmmakers in Idaho.
There's Gregory Bain.
Exactly. Great filmmakers. But I mean, like, if you're going to go to a university that isn't known for its film school, it's not going to attract people who might have a better shot at succeeding. Right. So you can get to know them and network them or whatever, like, you know, then probably don't.
You're better off majoring in literature and making films on the side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or writing or something like that.
So I read your Movie Maker article that you wrote, and I would recommend
that took almost as long to write as the script.
Well, I believe it, because if anybody hasn't read it, go to Movie Maker magazine website and just put in Lucas McNelly and it will be right there. And what I like about it, because this is very much my style, is that you were very personal in what you spoke about. And there was an absence, a chunk of time where you kind of stepped away. And but you came back, which is the yay moment. But I also think that, you know, stepping away can be hard too, because like you said, you had made the film, the name again, remind me the name, Upcountry.
Yes.
You had made Upcountry and it was on the hard drive, ready to go. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Like 99% done.
Yeah. And that there's all these times I feel like in a person's life where they get hit in the head by a 2x4, like something happens that they never saw coming. And and you have to pivot. And sometimes that means you pivot to your knees for a while. And so I think that's okay. I think that's a good thing. It ends up being a good thing. But can we talk about that moment you got hit in the head by a 2x4 by that film festival?
Yeah. So the plan was I shot Upcountry, and then what is my hair doing? All right, whatever. I
don't even want to know what mine's doing. I just
edit that out.
No, this is raw here, raw.
So I shot Upcountry, and then I was starting to edit it, and then I came up with the idea for A Year Without Rent, and I thought, oh, well, this will be good because I'll finish Upcountry during A Year Without Rent in like the downtime. So I was thinking there's gonna be more downtime than there was. Anyway, and then A Year Without Rent will increase my visibility in the film community, and then make Upcountry more viable for releasing, because I will have more of a reputation and more people will know who I am. So I was like, okay, I'm a big believer in like having projects work in tandem, because so like with Upcountry now being done and using that to try to promote the next one. So I finished it pretty much at the end of Upcountry. Picture locked it at the end of A Year Without Rent. And like one of the last things we did on A Year Without Rent was we color corrected it at Dustin Perlman's apartment in LA, and he's the DP. So then all that was left to do was to do the sound mix. And I took a little bit of a break after A Year Without Rent because holy shit was I burned out and exhausted.
I bet.
And then I think in there we did Jack's campaign, because I tried consulting on crowdfunding campaigns for a little while, and that was hit or miss. That's a whole different thing. And then we were booked into a festival, and then we were not booked into a festival. So they something happened over on their end, and they bumped us for a different film. And I was like in the midst of booking a flight to go to Philadelphia to mix the film, to do the sound mix. So then I was like, okay, so maybe I won't go to Philadelphia right now because shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then we just sort of, it got put on a back burner for the sound mixer because he was like, nobody was getting paid. So it was all just sort of fitting it in. And he had sort of cleared a spot in his schedule. He's like, hey, if you don't mind, I'm going to take this paid gig right now. I'm like, yeah, definitely do that. And so then it just sort of, he would chip away at it. And then my life got crazy. And then all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, it's been 3 years.
Yeah.
And like
it happened so fast.
Yeah. And I like got married and had a kid, and we had like a lip balm go viral for the day job. And, you're just like, holy shit. And then you're looking up and you're going, the computer I did this on doesn't work anymore. Fuck. So then, and I have depression issues. So that sort of spiraled a little bit, in that sort of part of my brain.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do a next project. Like my brain wouldn't let me do a next project until this project was done. Cause it's not like, I wrote like 2/3 of the script and I'm like, this isn't working. I'll pivot and write something else. But cause this was, done, essentially done.
So close.
Right. Like it was sound mixed enough that we could have released it, but obviously we weren't going to release it without actually finishing the sound mix. Cause then my sound guy would kill me because his name would be on it. And I've known him for a very long time. So that would be bad. So then I just sort of sat there and it just sort of became this thing that was like hovering over my life that I couldn't shake. And then when the pandemic started, I had a little more time, not a lot more time, because my wife and I own a soap company, and soap was kind of helpful in the early stages of the pandemic. So we were still pretty busy. But I couldn't go anywhere else, like go hang out with anybody else. So I was just like, you know what, this is the time to pull the Band-Aid off on this. And so then I got Dustin on the line and I was like, hey, I don't know if you remember me, person who DP'd this film, but hey, we should try to finish this. And he couldn't get, because we did it on Final Cut 7, which is an old program, and he didn't have a working copy.
At this point, how many years has it been since you
So this was like March or April of 2020, and we wrapped in September of 2010.
Yep.
We had wrapped production, and so we got bumped from the film festival in probably early 2012, something like that. Which is a long time to edit a film, but I was traveling around the country.
Yeah, right.
It was kind of a hard film to edit because it's for reasons.
Also, just
for narrative reasons.
And when you step in and out of editing, it's
hard to get a rhythm.
It's very hard to get a rhythm.
Yeah. And and it was kind of a difficult film. It's a little bit of an experimental film. So the editing does a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of swings that some of them work and some of them don't work. And, it's not your straightforward romantic comedy, master shot, over the shoulder thing. There's like no dialogue in the third act of the film. It's a whole thing. So it was going to be a longer film to edit anyway.
Right.
And I forget where I was going with that.
You were going with the the Final Cut 7, whatever.
Yeah, so Final Cut, we couldn't. My copy didn't work because they discontinued it, and Dustin's girlfriend had a copy that was on an old computer that was still working.
Oh,
so
cool.
He was able to do whatever he needed to do to get it to me, and then the sound guy was like, "Oh yeah, let's definitely do that. I have more time now." And so we did it back and forth over email, which is, oh my God, that takes so long. Because like normally if you were in a sound mix, like you and I would be in the room, right? And you play it and I go, what do you think? Do you think this should be a little louder or a little softer? So, but like imagine you just have to do that over email. You're like, okay, so at 4 minutes and 51 seconds.
So
I think this is a little loud.
Were you having to like download it every time you had to listen to something?
Yeah, he would send me like a rough, like an MP3 or an M4A or whatever, something like that.
Yeah.
And then I would have to resync it with the video file, and then I would watch it and I would give him notes, and we would go. And then he would do a paid gig, and he'd come back to it 3 weeks later, and it was just like endless revisions. And then finally we got pretty close, and I was like, you know what? Send me the thing. Because he would send me just the whole mix thing. I'm like, I think we're pretty close, but this is taking forever. And at this point, it was just levels, and it wasn't like filters or getting out noises or anything. I'm like, just send me all of them as individual tracks, and I'll go through and I can do the levels and tweak them up and down as I needed. And that helped a lot. That sped things up pretty quickly. And then we were done at like Christmas, like just before Christmas of 2020.
Wow. Well, I will never complain about editing this podcast again. That sounds horrible.
Yeah, it was not fun. It was not ideal.
But like so that had to be extremely depressing on top of the depression issues and all of that stuff. I mean, like for people who, I think as artists, a lot of us have complex emotional strength / weakness that can become a strength, and I think we are probably hyper sensitive and judgmental about ourselves. And
the good ones are.
And I've also
the bad ones think everything they do is wonderful, and how dare you say otherwise. There's those too.
This is true. This is very true. And I've also found that a lot of filmmakers and writers and artistic people in general, a lot of us have this disease to please. And whether you want to please, it's your audience you're trying to please, or the people who worked on the set with you're trying to please. And that moment when you were writing and talking about worrying that people would be mad at you because you had stepped, I mean, this was just to back up a little bit, Lucas is he's like the original crowdfunder. Like, I don't think I'd ever even knew what crowdfunding was when I first met you, and you were crowdfunding for a year without a rent. Right. And which is hence why.
And we crowdfunded Upcountry before that.
Wow. Did I know?
So it was one of the first, maybe. It was one of the first. We only raised 4,000. It was like right after Gary did his. And David and Karen did theirs. So it was really, really early.
Yeah, that was really early. And so people were all new to this kind of thing of giving artists money with nothing you were promised to get in return, except maybe not even digital copies, DVDs people used to send out back then, a shout out on Twitter, There was those really early days. So there really weren't incentives so much in the beginning. It was more of a just.
And we were all over promising our incentives because no one knew any better. And we're like, we'll send you dinner through the mail.
On a donkey,
because that'll be fun. And people are like, that's gonna cost a lot, don't do that.
And also some of the stuff that people promise is time consuming. It's really time consuming. I mean, there's a lot of, like, if you need tips on crowdfunding, go talk to Lucas. But the whole thing about letting people down and all of that, I mean, that's real. That's a really tough thing. And even when everything goes perfectly, you worry about letting people down, let alone if there's a speed bump, so how do you handle that now? Like, after having had this experience and realizing that the world doesn't end if you step away from it for 10 years, people are actually pretty understanding. And I think it speaks a lot to the people you choose to work with on your projects, that they're not jerks, that they were like, yeah, great, let's do this, Like, what do you think about it now in hindsight?
In hindsight, it's just the lesson I keep learning over and over and over again, is to stop worrying about what people think. Because there's nothing you can do about it, and you just sort of have to do the right thing, I guess. Because I think there's two types of people. There's the people who worry about what other people think, and it becomes very damaging to them personally. And then there's the people who are like people who don't care. You have to not care what people think because it's going to hurt you personally to spend all your time thinking about it. But then there's other people who don't care what other people think because they're assholes. And they're just, they're just like, whatever, I'll treat you like shit because you don't matter to me. So you have to be not that one.
Not that one. Choose the not that one.
Choosing not that one. So but you really have to like take care of people, and so that's it's hard to separate that from, oh my god, I'm letting this person down, because you want them to think it's the greatest experience ever, even though it's not gonna be, because that's not possible. But you want that thing because you want to, in theory, you want to have a sustainable career, and you want to have a group of people that you like could work with again in the future. You don't want to shoot a small film and then 3 films later say, hey, so and so, you want to work on the next one? And they go, fuck no. You want to be able to come back to those people when it's appropriate. Or on multiple things in a row.
And you do tend to have like do you have like this unit that you go back
kind
to
of
this,
kind of people? There's Sean Hackett, who he's a producer, and the sound guy, I think the sound guy's gonna mix the next one, and I was like, we're not doing this over email. He's like, oh no, definitely not. So hopefully there'll be no more pandemic for that. And then I had some people, and when I lived in Pittsburgh, I had some people that I went back to. And then when I left Pittsburgh, not so much, because they're like local people. So then it's a question. So the trick of when you're in Maine, which is there's some local people here, but there's not a ton. So you end up importing a lot of people. So you end up just importing. I'm finding you end up importing different people. Each time based on scheduling and whatnot.
Are you curious? Are you using any of the people you met along the way with the Year Without Rent? Like people's sets who you went on, maybe you didn't know them before you stepped on set?
Yeah, so Victoria Westcott's producing this, and I met her on A Year Without Rent. She did a Canadian comedy, which I did like one day on, and then we road tripped down to LA for something. And then I met Marty actually on A Year Without Rent, and he's producing on this, and that's a fly. Yeah, and then I'm talking to some other people of just trying to get the crew filled out, and it's just a question of looking at people's like availability and just talking to people that you worked on multiple things and going, hey, are you available? Do you maybe want to do this? And then I got the lead actress sort of from A Year Without Rent. Sort of, kind of.
Cool. Kind of, sort of?
Sort of, kind of, yeah. So, yeah, we were trying to find an actress. It's a tricky, like, for the movie. So the movie's about a woman, a mother and daughter, and they inherit a house and in Maine, and then they find a lot of money hidden in the house, and then it goes badly from there because it's dark. And there's a tricky window for actresses where, because the daughter is like 18, and so there's a tricky window for actresses where if you start playing the mother of an 18-year-old, then they push you into the mom category, and then that you stop being in the hot mom category, even if you're still hot. It's just, like Hollywood's very weird and misogynistic and everything, and like you instantly go from Jennifer Lawrence to Helen Mirren, and there's like no gap in between where you play normal people.
And I would argue that Helen Mirren is still pretty hot. I think she's
right.
Totally.
Yeah, but there's that tendency to do that. So actresses are not super excited to play the
mom,
play the mother of like someone who's grown up. A little bit. So that makes it a little trickier.
They're probably afraid, like, if they play this one indie role as the mom, even though it's a really good gritty role, now I'm going to be labeled a mom. Like, that first time they play a mom is probably
it's tricky, and it's dumb in 19 different ways, because but what are you gonna do? So anyway, during a really, and this kind of goes back to the depression thing, so there was a really weird stretch on A Year Without Rent where like everybody got, like, a bunch of people got really mad at me for something that wasn't my fault. And it wasn't even like normal. It wasn't people that it was like just internet trolls. Like a bunch of internet trolls. Like I was driving from Minnesota to Seattle, like one shot. And so it was like 2 days, to get across there. Maybe 3 days, because I was trying not to like do 800 miles in a day and like burn myself out too quickly. But I got to Seattle and there was just this pile of shit of people of like these trolls yelling at me. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
You know? And it was just, I don't even remember what triggered it, but it was weird. And I like, then there's also like text messages from my mother asking if I'm okay, because she's of course reading all this shit.
Oh.
And then in the midst of all that, there's an email from Duplass, and he's like, hey, so Sean told me about what you're doing. I think it's really great. And that was like the email. That was like the whole email. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know cool. I was like, I didn't know Duplass knew who I was. This is cool. I mean,
yeah,
you know, it's not George Clooney, but it's Duplass. It's a guy he's in the he's in the grade ahead of me, as it were. Yeah. You know, it's like you're the freshman and like the senior is like, hey,
the cool whatever. Senior.
Yeah, the cool senior's talking to you, and you're like, oh wow, cool. And that like really made like a bigger difference than it should have, probably. Yeah. Just because it came at the perfect time. So when we were looking for the actress,
so I'm curious, stop for a second. Did you reply to the email?
Yeah, I think so. I replied like, thank you, blah, 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 something like that.
But you should reply again. Really, and say, like, that really helped me.
This is where I'm going with this.
Okay, good.
Let me finish the story.
I'm going to shut up.
So we're looking for this actress. I'm like, you know who would know, who might have a good idea, and I have their email address, is Duplass. Ooh. So I emailed Jay, and I was like, hey, you probably don't remember this, blah, 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 blah. That was really, like that just really helped me at that time. And I was like, this is what we're looking for. Do you know anybody? And he's like, oh yeah, I definitely know somebody. Leonora Pitts. She's like, she's fantastic. And so then I looked at her stuff. I was like, oh yeah, she is great. And so I contacted her, and that's our lead.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet. See, the year without rent. It's kind of still, you're paying it forward in that way. It's still coming back and helping you. And I think a lot of people don't, when they talk about networking and stuff, they really come at it sometimes from a selfish perspective and not thinking about it organically. And from all the people I've interviewed over the years, I think the one consistent thing is those people who have always paid it forward and been very organic and not doing something for somebody to get something back. They just they choose that other person, that nice person, and and they help people out, and then it always comes back, I think. Eventually.
Even if you wanted to do it cynically, like it's the most obvious way to do it. Like if you were going to sit there in your like Dr. Evil lair and think, oh, how could I get people to like me? Just be nice to them is the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
Like if I want you to like notice me, I'm going to say, hey, Jeannie, I think you look great. I'm not going to
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm not going to say, hey, can you do this thing for me? Because you'll be like,
you look like an ugly troll. Can you do this for me?
Can you help me? Yeah, if I'm like, oh, your hair looks great today, you'd be like, oh, what do you need?
Yeah. I haven't washed it in 3 years, but yeah, it's great also.
But yeah, I mean, that's just the easiest way to network is to help other people out with their stuff.
Yeah.
Because they remember that, and you are doing a good thing, and you get good karma out of it, and it feels good to do it, and it's then it's the rising tide raises all the boats sort of situation. It's not a zero-sum game.
Yeah. And I really do think too, like helping people on sets and stuff, like you were saying before about the film school thing, it lets you know if you want to do this or not. But it also, there's this bonding that happens, when you're in, it's sort of like a traumatic experience in some ways.
Yeah.
It's like going to war with someone.
Yeah.
You come out bonded because it's, like you said, there are some tough days and you survive it together. And then you're like, oh God, let's have that 20 beers.
Yeah. There's people like locally that I see once a week and I couldn't tell you their name.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's people who I did like 2 days of a shoot with, working next to them and like 10 years ago. And I can tell you what they wore.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. Like it's such a weird thing where you're like thrown together. It's almost like war in a way. You're thrown together and you're like, really close, and then you're ripped apart like a week later or 2 weeks later or whatever.
Yeah.
But you remember all that because it's like such an intense time.
It is really intense, and it's actually amazing that any films ever get made. Like it's so there's so much,
it's a
and
miracle.
I think so. Like, because you're also a writer, so like, can you just talk a little bit about like what you've learned about writing from having had those experiences on set? Like, what are the things you maybe do differently now, or because your overall goal to do you want to always be an indie filmmaker, or like what are you?
I mean, I think Marvel and I have the same level of interest in each other. So there's that. My goal is I would like to be kind of like a less talented Soderbergh. If I had to pick something.
Yeah.
I like doing 100K movies where you have like a crew of like 10 people. I really like doing those. I think they're a lot of fun. I wouldn't mind doing some $5 to $10 million movies too. That would be fun as well. But I would like to go back and forth between the two.
Yeah.
I think that would be the most fun way to do it.
Yeah.
Depending, and it's a lot of it. It's like just the writer in me. It's just depending on like the story and what I find interesting about the story, and then what. So like after I got Upcountry done, I instantly wrote like 2 scripts. Well, I wrote one script, which is a bigger script. It's like a pandemic road trip movie, and that's probably like a $3 million movie. And then when I realized that the Delta variant was coming, I was like, okay, well, I should write something smaller that I can shoot in Maine that doesn't require crossing multiple red state borders and dying. So then I wrote this. But then I also, in the middle of that, was writing. I came up with it. I stumbled upon this idea. And how did I even get there? I was looking for something else. I was researching something else. Trying to remember what exactly I was researching. I think I was just looking for, how you're looking for one tiny little detail for a script that's like not important at all, but it suddenly like puts you down a rabbit hole, and like 3 days later you're like, I've learned about nuclear physics. Like, why did you learn about nuclear physics? Well, I needed to describe what was on his t-shirt, and that's where it took me. So I went down one of those rabbit holes for the pandemic road trip movie, and I found this like really interesting story. And I was like, oh, well, this would be a really great limited series. So I started sort of outlining that. And then I sort of got into outlining and went, oh, I'm not a good enough writer yet to do this. So I'll put that on the back burner a little bit and work on some other stuff first.
And so then that's when you wrote this.
And then I wrote the noir film.
Yeah. So
it was just one of those things. I just was like, okay, I'm not ready to write this yet. I need to do a ton more research on it because it's big.
Yeah.
And it's the whole thing.
Yeah. So like when you decided I'm going to write this and then I'm going to make it, like when you're writing a script for feature, are you already thinking, is this something I'm going to make, or is this something I'm going to pitch, or is like, are you already thinking from that perspective? And if it is something you're going to make, does that then, do you put your producer hat on and allow those things to limit you, or do you just write with reckless abandon and worry about that later?
So for the road trip movie, I didn't put the producer hat on. I just wrote the story, and I just wrote it as big as it needed to be. And then it just ended up, it's still not even that big in terms of scope. It's just, that's what it needed to be. And I was like, how am I going to get an entire production across the country? I don't know. Fuck it. We'll figure that out later. And then I don't write anything that I don't plan on directing. Yeah. So I've never written a script to pitch to anybody. Like I'm not even sure what that would entail. I don't know how to pitch to the thing. I don't know how to do that. One of the like things that throws people when they read my scripts is like there's just stuff not there. Like my first meeting with the lead actor, she's like, so this scene at the end, is there more there? I'm like, oh yeah, there's a lot more there. There's like a whole like minute of stuff that it's just emotion. She's like, okay, that's kind of what I figured. Because I'm gonna direct it. So I'm like, okay, I know exactly what this is. And I don't need the audience I don't need the reader to know this.
Right.
it's not going to stop you from wanting to do the film.
Because you're actually not even, if you know you're going to direct it and you're going to make it yourself, then it's not that script that you're presenting is really not a reader script.
Right.
It's, it's your blueprint, but maybe just for actors, it helps them.
Yeah, it's mostly for to get actors and like crew on board. And well, Upcountry, we didn't even have we had an outline. So we just shot off the outline. But for this, I figured we needed an actual script. But yeah, you're trying to basically tell your cast and your crew and whoever, maybe someone who wants to put some money in, I know what I'm doing. This is what it's going to look like. This will not be terrible. See, here's evidence that
it will not suck.
It will not suck. And even this, it's like I've told actors when they read it, I'm like, okay, so it's a little bare bones because I'm going to fill in some of the character stuff later when I know who the actors are to like play to the actor's strengths.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, okay, cool.
And also too, like when you get to know the actors better too,
Yeah.
I mean, when you're
and there's always going to be stuff that you want to add in later. And yeah, like I had to change something today and I haven't written it yet. So I'm sort of writing it in my head, but just something came up and I'm like, okay, this has to change. It was in order to get an actor. And I was like, it was like a whole scheduling thing. And we were like, for the production, I was like, okay, so we got to get it done before the leaves change. And then the leaves have started to change. Have they started to change near you?
We've had weird weather this year.
Yeah,
this
it's
summer.
been weird weather. And my brother said, because he's outdoorsy, he's like, the leaves are going earlier, man. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like a couple days, a week. They're going now. And I'm like, I'm like, we're not gonna be able to catch that at all.
Because normally I'm in New York, you're in Maine, so we're not that far different, but you're a little bit cool. You get a little bit cooler than us.
And I'm right on the water, so.
Yep. And normally I start seeing changing right around Labor Day. Like there's a couple trees I notice are always the first to start. Yeah. So I know once they start, it's gonna just,
and they snowball. They don't even do the foliage report in Maine until September 15th. Like the first report. So like, and we are always green in the first report.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm fine. When we shot Upcountry, I think we shot it somewhere around the 10th to the 15th, somewhere in there. And they were just starting to go in Aroostook County, which goes way earlier.
Yeah.
So like I saw like 5 trees yesterday starting to go.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, well, all right, so there goes that. We gotta move the setting of the film to it's no longer summer. It's gotta be fall now.
Right. And like, so like all those things as an indie filmmaker, things you have to shift and pivot and all that kind of stuff. Like, if I could go back in time, I would probably, even though that one experience I had making my silly little short film just so that I could experience it, I learned I don't want to be a filmmaker, but I also, there were things about it that I really loved. And I think that one experience for me was, I shouldn't judge everything based on that because I had some really messed up things happen on that whole experience that would never happen again. So
what were the experiences? What were the parts of it you liked?
I cried the first time I heard somebody say the words that I wrote. Like that first day when the words came out of somebody else's mouth. I was like, oh my God. And all of a sudden it like occurred to me that all these people came together just to create this thing that I came up with out of my head. Right. And that was like really humbling.
That you wrote parts of drunk.
Yeah. I actually wrote that script like being a voyeur at a coffee shop. But the other thing was really cool was being on set and also listening to my words come out of somebody's mouth and saying, that sounds really stupid. Like,
yeah.
Like,
yeah, that feeling.
Cut. Like I wasn't the director, but I was like, okay, can you actually just say nothing? Like, can you just look at her and don't say anything. And he's like, oh God, yes. I was hoping somebody would take this line out. Like,
You're so like, who wrote this shit?
Who wrote this shit? And so it's so good. Like, even if, so like when that was such a great experience, because now when I go back and I write stuff, not, desiring to make it, but when I go back and write stuff, I always think to myself, do I really need this line? Like, imagine somebody saying this. Is somebody going to really want to say this? Like, it changes when you go back and write. I mean, don't you think?
Yeah, I think you can't be like beholden to the words on the page when you're on set, because they just might not work. And like, there's a great Clint Eastwood story where he got this script, or I think he got new pages or something, and he's read them, and he just took a pen and he just scratched out all of it, like except for like 3 words. And the writer's sitting there, he's like, oh my God, I'm gonna get fired from this. He goes, Mr. Eastwood, if you don't mind me asking, what was wrong with it? And he just sort of looks at me, he's like, nothing. Now I know what to think.
Oh, awesome.
So sometimes it needs to be in the script so you know what to think, but then you can't be the idiot who leaves it in the edit.
Right.
you know?
Right.
It's sometimes it's just backstory for the actors.
The other thing that I think is really cool too is seeing how other people interpret your words, not just the actors, but like the DP, the director. Like for me, I had that experience. I didn't want to do anything other than write and produce. I wanted to have that experience of what does it feel like to have people kind of mess with your thing. And it was really cool. Like, to just be like, that was an interesting choice. Like, that was fun. I actually really liked that.
That's one of my favorite parts, is like when you have a thing and then someone else brings something into it that improves your thing, and you're like, oh, that's such a good idea.
You're going to make me look really good.
Yeah, this is going to look really great. Like, and sometimes
that was my idea.
Yeah. Well, the thing so I had this short, Gravita, which has like 200 something million views on YouTube. And like the thing that got in every single review was there's a red light bulb in the corner, and it's not in the script at all. It's like the gaffer had a red light bulb, and he's like in his gear anyway, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna try this red light bulb in the corner, do you mind? I'm like, no, let's try. What the hell, we got a little extra time, let's try the light bulb, sure. And so he did it, and I was like, oh, that looks cool, let's do that. And every single review,
and they love it.
Like, yeah, they loved it. It was weird.
That's
so
wild.
It's like stuff like that. And like On Up Country, Dustin framed the shots, so almost every shot of the film there's foliage in the foreground because they're in the woods, and that's just not something I had thought of. And I was like, and he's like, if we do this, then it'll just feel like more compressed.
Yeah.
And like they're deeper in the woods than they are, even if we're standing on a road looking at them in the woods.
Yeah.
So at every opportunity, we had stuff in the foreground to sort of, make them feel more lost.
And that was interesting too for me as a writer who wasn't directing, to listen to the conversations the director and the DP had, and listen to them each. They each came to set with their own vision, like, and then discussing with each other to see which would not win, but those two, like if you're a writer looking for people to make your work, your DP and your director should be like, they should have a little bromance, like or woman, romance, whatever, like it just whatever they are, but they should really jive. Like, so if you were going to give advice to like a writer who wanted to maybe direct their first thing, or thinking about being a writer / director, like, could you imagine just being a writer?
Yeah. I mean, I've directed other people's stuff. I've directed plays. I directed one play, and I sort of directed another play. Anyway, so yeah, I think it would be really helpful to direct somebody else's script, because you learn really quickly what happens to a script that you didn't write. So I directed a play that Lucas McNelly wrote, who is a filmmaker in Miami, and he wrote a play and ended up this thing anyway. And we really took a lot of it out and shifted stuff around to make it work on stage. And he came to the production and he liked it, whatever. But it was
Were
like
you nervous?
I was very nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like on Filmmaker Mag's 25 to watch one year, I think.
Oh,
anyway,
cool.
he's doing pretty well. Or I don't know what he's doing now. Anyway, but yeah, that was really instructive to sort of see like how I attacked his script, which was a good script, and change things that weren't working, and then to think, and then you sort of extrapolate what would someone else would do to your script, and you just have to realize that the script is not the end product.
Yeah.
Like the film is the end product. So if it's not working in the film, then it doesn't matter what it looks like on the page. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Or similarly, I always say, if someone's like, well, that's not how it is in the book. And I'm like, who cares? This is not the book. We're not reading a book here. This is a movie.
Right. I remember.
So I would say, yeah, have somebody else direct your stuff, direct other people's stuff. Just write a short and just shoot it on your phone.
Yeah. I mean,
with your friends.
Big believer in every writer doing a short, because you might actually learn you do want to be a director. Like that would be a cool thing to be a writer and director. But you're just going to learn about writing, like so much about writing that. And I think my biggest lesson in that was that you really don't need as much dialogue as you think you need.
And you should also edit.
Yeah.
You should. I think every writer who has any aspirations to, even if they don't, the hell with it, even if they don't want to direct, they should write a short that they direct and then that they edit, because then you see all the sort of levels of it. And so, you realize in the editing, you're going to take out big chunks of dialogue because they just aren't necessary anymore, because someone had a look that did all of that work for you. And then you're going to realize when you're editing, you're going to be like, why the fuck do I not have a shot of this? I really need a shot of this.
Yeah.
And then if you do direct, or you're going to know, oh, I really need this line here.
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't work. And I don't know how you could be a successful writer without having some knowledge of those other jobs.
Yeah. And because I remember,
unless you're just going to be a writer who's going to complain that they butchered your script all the time.
Yeah. But I think it's also a good experience to have your script butchered, because then you start realizing, oh, well, how did I write it so they didn't understand? Like, what could I have done that might have helped them understand the vision I had better?
Right.
And
maybe their vision was better than yours.
Right. And sometimes the edit process is just, like you said, you don't get enough coverage. Like, you didn't, like, I wanted more body language, and we just didn't have time. We ran out of time to get all that kind of coverage. So then it had to become something different, and sometimes that's just the way it is. And you know what, if it ends up a shitty little film, who cares? Like, you still learned a lot from it, I mean, and sometimes people have to kind of let go of that whole, but my little short film didn't get into 25 festivals and whatever. That's me,
Programming festivals is hard. So, I mean,
it is hard.
It's such a crapshoot unless you've got like a big star in it or something.
Yeah. And also too, that's sometimes it's just that question of fitting in the right time slot. Like, if you've got a short film that's 25 minutes, but if you've got that lessens your shot. Like, if you have a short film that's under 10 minutes, you might have a better shot of being able to squeeze in between features or to, whatever.
And there's like shorts that have like been rejected by all the top tier festivals, gone on to do a really good festival run, and then get accepted on the next year. And some of those festivals that rejected them. I've heard that happening.
Yeah.
And sometimes, it might be they have 3 zombie movies programmed that are better than yours, and doesn't mean yours is bad or is even worse than some of the other films that got programmed. It's just that they're like, that's enough zombie films already. How
did your short get so many views? How many views did you say?
238 million.
How the heck did that happen?
So
Besides it being fabulous.
Well, of course, that's definitely
of course.
It's only the most watched narrative short film like in the internet. So it's a 23, I think, maybe 25-minute, nearly silent film about a pregnant woman. So obviously, I thought the internet would be the best place to show it.
Yeah.
Because so this is how I met Sean Hackett, actually. So
this was not your child's birth movie.
No. So I was supposed to make another movie, and then the actress got pregnant, and so that didn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, let's make it just about a pregnant woman. She's like, okay, that sounds great. So then we wrote it and made it and all that. And so then it was getting some good reviews online, and Sean Hackett read about it, and he's like, hey, I'm running this new film festival, the Now Film Festival, which is partnering with MySpace. Remember MySpace?
Yeah, I remember YouTube. MySpace.
And this is like early YouTube. And he's like, do you want to submit your film for it? He's like, I'll give you a waiver. I'm like, well, it's 23 minutes long. And I feel like we're not going to do very well. I'm like,
yeah,
I guess, but okay. He's like, well, just send it to me anyway. And so I want to see it. He's like, if you don't mind, just send it out. I'd like to see it because I hear good things. I'm like, okay. So I sent it to him. He's like, this is great. Can we program it? I'm like, I guess. I mean, sure. Why not? And so we nearly won the damn thing.
Oh my God.
We lost by one vote to Short with Rainn Wilson.
One
vote. And it was featured on the front page of YouTube for like a week. And it was a whole thing. And then the image is of this pregnant woman getting dressed. And I think, honestly, it's like a fetish thing. in Muslim countries, because a lot of the views are like Muslim countries.
That's hysterical.
That's like our working theory on it, because it just like picked up like 200 million views in like a 9-month period. So it got on the algorithm got a hold of it.
Yeah.
But don't tell anyone that, because I want people to think that it's the most successful short film in the history of the internet.
Or people with a fetish.
Yeah, or people with a fetish. Maybe it could be on the new OnlyFans.
So, I want people to know how they can learn more about the new film that you're doing. And
Maine Noir.
Maine Noir.
It's gonna be awesome.
And you're crowdfunding now, right?
On seed&spark? Crowdfunding now. Yes, we're on seed&spark. It's mainnoir.com. Spelled just the way you think it would be spelled. And we're raising $45,000 to shoot the thing here in my hometown of Waldoboro, Maine, which would be the first time anyone has ever shot a film in this town in the smack dab middle of touristy part of Maine, if you can believe that no one's ever filmed here before. Mel Gibson filmed a couple scenes the next town over in like the 90s, and people were
thank God he didn't film. Yeah, but thank God he didn't film one there, because it would have ruined this whole.
Just over the border.
Yeah, stay over there, Mel.
Yeah, so it's like a throwback to those 40s and 50s noirs, like Detour, the ones that are like you feel like they're being held together by scotch tape and like baling wire or whatever, and they're like they have no budget and like, but they're very alive because of that. So that's sort of the idea we're going for.
Cool.
And it's female centric, and no one calls her Dame.
And it's dark. You've got
dark.
There's money, because I'm renovating a house, and I was very disappointed there's no money in the wall.
Yeah. Very disappointing, isn't it?
Very disappointing. Yeah. I was hoping for some.
Yeah, we bought an old house, and I was kind of hoping we would find some money hidden away somewhere, but
was that part of your
not yet.
Your old house, was that part of the inspiration for this? Like, was there anything specific that was an inspiration, or just that you wanted to kind of, you knew you were going to shoot it in your hometown?
Yeah, it was part of it, and it was a lot of looking around and going, okay, what do I have access to? We still don't have the main location for the house, but we'll find one. And it was originally written for a different actress, and then she couldn't do it. And I was just sort of thinking, okay, what can I write that would be fast, that would be cheap, that will work if it's fast and it's cheap? And so then it became a noir pretty quickly. And then I just sort of like started thinking of ideas of what could work with that. and I sort of like outlined the story in like a day.
Yeah.
From when I started thinking I was going to write it, it took me like a day to outline the story or to come up with an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wrote it in like 19 days.
Wow.
And then it just sort of changed. It changed like 6 or 7 times, like the various story mechanics of it. Going, you go down this road and you're like, oh, no, let's back up. That's not going to work. So yeah, and it was
familiar
always
with that road.
Yeah, and it was always sort of designed to be very sparse and like not have any sort of side quests. It's very linear and like
Yeah.
So it'll be fun.
So I can't believe you're crowdfunding again. That is like the most grueling thing. It's very so grueling. It's exhausting. But so maybe like a couple tips for people who are also crowdfunding.
Get more people to help you. Get lots of people to help you. Get you to help you.
Everyone's gonna start tweeting me.
Thank people. Don't make thank yous a perk, because a thank you should just be a thank you because your mama raised you right.
That's right.
And I think the biggest thing people get hung up on in crowdfunding is, and it's really mental, of thinking, why hasn't Jimmy backed my campaign? Because Jimmy and I are tight, man, or whoever it is, and thinking, this person hasn't backed my campaign. Why not? And man, you don't know what's going on with Jimmy's life. Like, Jimmy might be broke right now. Jimmy, he might be going through a divorce. There's a lot of different things.
And you wrote a rom-com, and Jimmy's not feeling the love.
Yeah, he's not feeling it. Jimmy's phone might be broken. So you can't worry about the people who aren't there. You have to like focus on the people who are there.
Jimmy might have given up Twitter for Lent.
He might have given up. Yeah, totally. It's hard. I get in that trap every time. There was one person who I'm like, I haven't seen them retweeted or anything. That's weird, because they are very reliably. And then I looked and they hadn't been on Twitter since like March. And I'm like, oh, well, all right, that explains that. But yeah, there's gonna be people who don't show up, who you are shocked that won't show up. They don't show up. But then there are gonna be people who do show up, who you had no idea even knew you existed. And you have to focus on that, because those are the people who are there. Those are the people who showed up. And you have to build around that. And those other people who didn't show up, they might show up late. They might show up on that last day. Or they might, they might see you. So this is the story I always tell. So when my first feature, we got it programmed in the theater here. This is when I was living in Pittsburgh. We got it programmed in the theater here for a week. And so I came home for like a month ahead of time, and I just promoted the fuck out of it. We had flyers we were handing out, we were on the radio, just everything, So then on the second day that we were in the theater, a friend of mine comes in. This guy I played high school basketball with. I hang out with him every time I come home for Christmas. We like go to games together. I've known this guy since I was like 8 or whatever. And this is a guy you don't even think you need to tell that you're have a thing going on, because he's obviously going to know. So he walks in, he's like, hey, what are you doing here? He's like, why are you home? I was like, I'm here because of my film. I'm like, are you not here to see my film? He's like, you have a film? When did you make a film? I'm like, what the fuck, man? What are you here for? He's like, I'm here to see the Ridley Scott movie. Like, are you kidding me? So he had no idea. So he's like, oh, well, we're going to see the Ridley Scott movie. I'm like, just buy a ticket for my movie and then go see the Ridley. Nobody's gonna stop. I don't care. But so you can't worry about it. He just had no idea. He just hadn't heard. He'd been in a bubble. For a couple weeks and just had completely missed it.
Yeah.
So you can't worry about it.
You can't, and it's sort of like when you get married, all these people you think are going to come, you think they would never miss your wedding, and
how dare they?
They missed your wedding, they don't come.
Yeah.
And then there's always that surprise person that shows up that you're
one of those. Really? One of those is me. I probably won't come to the wedding you invite me to.
That's right.
Because I don't have a shirt with a collar on it. So, but I do have a fun wedding game.
You do?
Yeah, it's called Bet on the Ceremony. So what you do is you get a bunch of people, you pool, everybody throws in like $10 or whatever, and then you bet on the length of the ceremony. and whoever's closest wins the pot.
So, that's kind of fun.
And you have to all agree on a start and an end, you know, like usually like it starts like when the groom gets up there, and then it ends when they like leave together, or when the groom leaves. Usually when the groom leaves, in case the bride doesn't show up, because you have to factor that in sometimes, you know, like maybe it's sketchy, maybe she's not going to show. And so, and then you are definitely encouraged side bets on multiple other things, you know, whether or not someone will object.
Well, I'm gonna run this by my daughter. My daughter's getting married to a great guy.
Don't run it by her. No, you shouldn't tell her. You should just do it anyway.
Oh, actually, I know what I'll do. They're having a party on Saturday with a wedding party, and I'm gonna whisper it to a couple people in the wedding party. Don't tell them, but have this whole little gambling bet thing going on.
It's fun. So I remember I was at one wedding, and it's like near the end, and the preacher goes, "Let us pray." And over in the corner, I hear someone go, "Come on!"
Was there a bet about whether they were going to pray?
They're all on their watches like this.
Oh.
No, it's just like he knew, like if the guy's going to pray, like
too long.
They needed to be out. They needed to be done.
This sounds
if he was going to win.
Kind of like the football thing, like when people do those football things, and then it's like, it
makes it way more entertaining.
Well, I'm for it. All for it. So mainnoir.com.
Yes.
Get on over there.
Next Friday is the last day. That's going to be the day that I'm going to end up probably taking over Twitter again.
Okay. So final push though. I think a lot of times at the end.
Let's see if we can get it. Yeah, let's see if we can get it trending. You think we can get it trending? We've done it before.
What's the hashtag?
I guess it is hashtag Maine Noir, but I don't know if you need the hashtags as much to trend. I think maybe just.
Do you?
Maybe. We should do the hashtag anyway. Let's start doing the hashtag.
Which is kind of like, let's do the hashtag. Because you know what also too, I kind of remember, didn't you do something really intense? Like at the end, I remember was that when it got trending? Which campaign was that?
Jack's got trending.
Yes.
The All In for Jack got trending. I think the only crowdfunding campaign to get to ever trend on Twitter.
Yeah.
We didn't even make the goal, but we got damn close.
Got really close. I remember where, I don't remember what I was wearing, but I remember where I was sitting in my house when that happened. Because it was just like, oh my God. It was really, really intense. It was intense. It's kind of,
so we should, I think we could get this one trending. That'd be fun.
I think that'd be fun. I think all the reckless creatives should support another reckless creative and tweet about it. Because the thing is like, even if people, the other thing too, when you were talking about, you're always surprised when people don't contribute and don't, whatever. There's a lot to be said for retweets, for just shout outs of support, because you never know who who knows somebody else, who knows somebody else. And this is such a crazy art and industry that, everybody supporting each other is a lovely thing.
And you never know where it's going to end up. Like there's weird stories about, like the ripple effect of someone saw it and going, oh my God.
Yeah.
I have this cousin, so-and-so.
Yes. Who lives in Maine, who has nothing to do and has a house that you could film in.
We got a backer yesterday because my brother sold them a house.
Wow. And
then he mentioned something about the movie, and then they went and looked it up, and they're like, "Oh, cool, we'll get behind that."
That's really cool.
And so we're all sitting there. We saw the thing come in, and
that?
I'm like, does anyone know this person? I don't know this person. Like, and I couldn't. They had no friends in common with anybody, and I'm just like, this is weird. Where did this person come from?
Yeah, you never know. I mean, I had people, from Europe donating. I mean, people just you never know where they come from. But again, the pay it forward, don't be a jerk, don't suck. Everything's going to be great.
Be nice. Be excellent to each other. As Bill and Ted would say.
Be excellent.
Reckless Creatives is a Pipeline Artist original podcast. Like, subscribe, and follow us on social media at Pipeline Artists. And find more info at pipelineartists.com/listen. Until next time, stay reckless.